You did everything they told you to do. Go to school, get a degree, work hard, save your money, and one day you'd own a home, raise a family, and live the American dream. So why are millions of millennials doing everything right and still falling behind? For decades, the American dream felt almost guaranteed. A steady job, a house with a yard, 2 cars in the driveway, family vacations, a comfortable retirement. It wasn't easy, but it felt possible. Today, for millions of millennials, that same dream feels like it's moving farther away every year. And here's the strange part. Many of them are the most educated generation in American history. So what happened? Was the dream sold on false promises? Or did the rules change while no one was looking? To understand what happened, we have to go back. Not to the 2000s, not even the 1990s. We have to rewind to a time when a single paycheck could support an entire family. In the 1950s and 60s, a typical American worker could often buy a home without a college degree. Housing was affordable, college tuition was manageable, healthcare cost a fraction of what it does today. Wages grew alongside productivity. As the economy expanded, ordinary families shared in that success. Owning a home wasn't considered a luxury, it was the next step in life. But then, something happened. The economy kept growing. Corporate profits climbed. Technology transformed entire industries. Yet for many workers, wages barely kept up with the rising cost of living. The gap grew slowly, almost invisibly. Year after year, then decade after decade. At first, hardly anyone noticed, until millennials entered adulthood. Imagine graduating from college. You're excited, optimistic, ready to start your career. Instead, you're handed something else, a mountain of student debt. For many millennials, adulthood didn't begin with building wealth. It began with paying it back, month after month, year after year. And while those payments kept coming, something else became dramatically more expensive. Housing. Here's where things get crazy. Home prices didn't just rise. In many parts of America, they exploded. Cities that were once affordable suddenly became out of reach. Even smaller towns saw prices climb at record speed. Saving for a down payment became harder every single year. Meanwhile, rent kept rising too. Every rent check delayed home ownership just a little longer. And every delay meant watching prices climb even higher. It became a race that millions felt they could never win. But that's not even the most surprising part. Previous generations often built wealth simply by owning a home. As property values increased, so did their net worth. That equity helped pay for retirement, college, new businesses, future investments. Millennials missed much of that opportunity. Not because they didn't want homes, because they couldn't get in before prices skyrocketed. The real story was hidden inside timing. Many millennials entered the workforce during one of the worst financial crises in modern history, the Great Recession. Jobs disappeared, companies stopped hiring, careers that should have started with momentum suddenly stalled. Some graduates accepted lower-paying jobs just to survive. Others moved back in with their parents. Years of earning potential quietly disappeared. Those lost years mattered more than most people realized. Because careers often build like compound interest, starting lower can affect earnings for decades. And just as the economy began recovering, another challenge appeared. Healthcare costs climbed. Childcare became incredibly expensive. Groceries rose. Insurance premiums increased. Every essential seemed to cost more. Suddenly, getting a raise didn't necessarily mean getting ahead. It often meant falling behind a little more slowly. Nobody expected another twist. Technology changed the job market faster than anyone imagined. Entire industries were disrupted. Stable careers became contract work. Gig jobs created flexibility, but they often came without retirement plans, without pensions, without guaranteed benefits. The traditional career ladder became much harder to climb. Then came social media. For the first time in history, people constantly compared their real lives to everyone else's highlight reel. Friends appeared to buy homes, take luxury vacations, drive expensive cars. Success looked effortless. Reality rarely was. Financial pressure became emotional pressure, and that invisible burden weighed heavily on an entire generation. But then something happened that changed everything. The pandemic arrived. Millions lost jobs. Businesses closed overnight. Entire industries shut down. For some millennials, it felt like recovering from one economic crisis, only to walk straight into another. Yet the biggest shock came afterward. Interest rates rose. Home affordability dropped even further. Monthly mortgage payments jumped. Even people earning solid incomes suddenly struggled to qualify for homes they could have easily afforded just a few years earlier. The finish line moved again. Here's the question that divides almost everyone. Did millennials fail, or did the economy simply become much harder to navigate? The numbers tell an interesting story. Millennials are delaying marriage, delaying children, delaying home ownership, not necessarily because they don't want those things, because they often can't afford them when previous generations could. That's a very different story. And yet, despite everything, millennials haven't stopped adapting. Many started businesses, built careers online, invested in the stock market, created side hustles, learned new skills, found creative ways to build wealth outside traditional paths. They didn't abandon the American dream. They redefined it. Maybe success isn't a giant suburban house anymore. Maybe it's financial freedom. Working remotely, owning your time, living without crushing debt, building a life on your own terms. Perhaps that's the biggest shift of all. Because every generation inherits the world it didn't create, but every generation also decides what comes next. The American dream isn't disappearing. It's evolving, and millennials happen to be the generation forced to rewrite its definition. Maybe future generations won't remember this era as the time the dream died. Maybe they'll remember it as the moment America realized the old formula no longer worked. Because sometimes the biggest changes in history don't happen with a single event. They happen when millions of ordinary people quietly stop believing that the yesterday's path will lead them to tomorrow's future. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more deep dives into the economic forces reshaping everyday life. And if you think this story was surprising, wait until you see what Gen Z is changing next.